In the early 19th century, a terrifying monster was brought to life, not in the cold, echoing corridors of a mad scientist's laboratory, but in the mind of a young woman named Mary Shelley. Her creation, Frankenstein's monster, has haunted our nightmares for over 200 years. But what if I told you that this iconic tale of horror owes its existence not to a spark of human genius, but to the eruption of a distant volcano? Yes, you heard that right. The story of Frankenstein is intertwined with one of the most cataclysmic events in human history, the eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815. Stay tuned as we delve into the shocking story of how a volcanic eruption half a world away may have played a crucial role in creating one of literature's most enduring legends. This is Amazing World Facts, where we uncover the hidden connections between history, science, and culture. And today, we're taking you on a journey back to the year 1815, a year when the world was plunged into darkness and despair, and a monstrous legend was born. On the island of Sumbawa in Indonesia, Mount Tambora stood tall, a dormant giant that had been silent for centuries. But on April 5, 1815, that silence was shattered by a deafening roar. The earth trembled, and a column of ash and smoke shot 43 kilometers into the sky. This was no ordinary volcanic eruption. This was the largest and most powerful eruption in recorded history. The eruption of Mount Tambora was so massive that it ejected over 160 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere. To put that into perspective, that's about 50 times more than the infamous Mount Helens eruption in 1980. The blast was heard as far away as 2,600 kilometers, and the ash cloud spread across the globe, blocking out the sun and causing temperatures to plummet. The immediate impact on the island of Sumbawa was catastrophic. Entire villages were buried under layers of volcanic ash, and tens of thousands of people lost their lives in the ensuing chaos. But the true horror of Mount Tambora's eruption was yet to be felt, as its effects rippled across the world. The eruption of Mount Tambora triggered what would come to be known as the Year Without a Summer. In 1816, the world experienced a drastic drop in temperatures, with some regions reporting snow in June and July. Crops failed, livestock perished, and famine spread like wildfire across Europe, Asia, and North America. This was a global climate disaster on an unprecedented scale. People of the time were bewildered and terrified by the strange and unseasonable weather. In Europe, the summer of 1816 was marked by relentless cold, rain, and gloomy skies. Many feared that the world was on the brink of an apocalyptic end, as famine and disease claimed countless lives. In Switzerland, where the eruption's effects were particularly severe, a group of writers sought refuge from the relentless rain and cold. Among them was an 18-year-old Mary Shelley, who, along with her soon-to-be husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, and other literary figures, retreated to the Villa Diodati by Lake Geneva. It was here, in the midst of this unnatural summer, that the seeds of a monstrous creation were sown. On a dark and stormy night in June 1816, the group gathered by the fire to pass the time. Lord Byron proposed a challenge. Each of them would write a ghost story to entertain the others. Little did they know that this simple challenge would give birth to one of the greatest works of Gothic literature ever written. Mary, inspired by the eerie atmosphere and the scientific discussions she had overheard, began to imagine a tale of a scientist who dared to defy the natural order by creating life from death. The story that emerged from her imagination was none other than Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. The bleak and unsettling weather outside the Villa Diodati seemed to mirror the dark and foreboding themes of Mary's story. The cold, dreary summer of 1816, brought on by the eruption of Mount Tambora, may have influenced the tone and mood of Frankenstein's creation. The novel, published in 1818, would go on to become a cornerstone of Gothic literature, exploring themes of ambition, hubris, and the consequences of playing God. But the eruption of Mount Tambora did more than just inspire a work of fiction. It had far-reaching consequences that shaped the course of history. The global climate anomalies caused by the eruption led to widespread crop failures and food shortages, triggering economic crises, social unrest, and mass migrations. In Europe, the summer of 1816 saw bread riots and protests as food prices soared. In North America, farmers struggled to grow crops, and many families were forced to abandon their homes in search of better land. The eruption of Mount Tambora also contributed to the spread of infectious diseases, as malnutrition and weakened immune systems made populations more vulnerable to outbreaks. One of the most devastating consequences was the spread of the first cholera pandemic, which began in India in 1817 and quickly spread across Asia, Europe, and Africa. The pandemic claimed millions of lives and forever altered the course of medical history. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was not just a product of a dark and stormy summer, it was also a reflection of the scientific revolution that was sweeping through Europe at the time. The early 19th century was a period of rapid scientific advancement, with groundbreaking discoveries in electricity, chemistry, and biology. One of the most influential scientific ideas that likely inspired Frankenstein was galvanism, the study of electricity's effects on animal tissues. Luigi Galvani's experiments with frog legs in the 1780s had demonstrated that electricity could cause muscle contractions, leading to the belief that electricity could be the spark of life. Mary Shelley was fascinated by these experiments and incorporated them into her novel, where Victor Frankenstein uses electricity to bring his creature to life. The novel's exploration of the ethical dilemmas surrounding scientific experimentation and the consequences of unchecked ambition resonated deeply with the anxieties of the time. Frankenstein's monster became a symbol of the fears and uncertainties brought about by the rapid pace of scientific progress. Over the past 2 centuries, Frankenstein's monster has become one of the most iconic figures in popular culture. The story has been adapted countless times in films, plays, and other media, each interpretation adding new layers to the legend. But what remains at the core of the story is the cautionary tale of a scientist who dared to play God and the monstrous consequences that followed. Today, the themes explored in Frankenstein are more relevant than ever as we grapple with the ethical implications of new technologies like genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and synthetic biology. Mary Shelley's novel serves as a powerful reminder of the responsibilities that come with scientific discovery and the potential dangers of overstepping the boundaries of nature. Frankenstein was not the only work of art to emerge from the ashes of Mount Tambora's eruption. The Year Without a Summer also inspired other writers and artists to explore themes of darkness, despair, and the fragility of human existence. Lord Byron, for instance, wrote his apocalyptic poem Darkness in 1816, which vividly describes a world where the sun has been extinguished and humanity descends into chaos. The poem is a haunting reflection of the despair that gripped Europe in the wake of the volcanic winter. The painter J.M.W. Turner was also influenced by the unusual atmospheric effects caused by the eruption. His vibrant, fiery sunsets, which have become some of his most famous works, were inspired by the vivid colors created by the ash in the atmosphere. But what exactly causes a volcanic eruption to trigger such dramatic changes in the global climate? The answer lies in the vast quantities of sulfur dioxide released into the atmosphere during the eruption. When sulfur dioxide combines with water vapor, it forms tiny droplets of sulfuric acid, which reflect sunlight away from the Earth and cool the planet's surface. This phenomenon is known as a volcanic winter, and it can last for several months or even years, depending on the scale of the eruption. In the case of Mount Tambora, the sheer volume of sulfur dioxide released was enough to disrupt the global climate for several years, leading to the Year Without a Summer and its devastating consequences. The eruption of Mount Tambora was a rare event, but it was not unique. Throughout history, other volcanic eruptions have also caused global climate disruptions, such as the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883 and the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991. Today, scientists closely monitor active volcanoes around the world, using advanced technology to predict and prepare for potential eruptions. While we cannot prevent volcanic eruptions, we can mitigate their impact by understanding the science behind them and taking appropriate precautions. But the question remains, could another eruption like Mount Tambora happen again? And if it did, how would our modern world cope with the challenges of a new volcanic winter? So, did a volcano create Frankenstein? In a way, yes. The eruption of Mount Tambora set off a chain of events that ultimately led to the creation of one of the most enduring legends in literature. The next time you read Frankenstein or watch a film adaptation of the story, remember the dark and stormy summer of 1816 and the volcanic eruption that shook the world. Thanks for watching Amazing World Facts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history, science, and beyond. And as always, stay curious.